China Watch Radio is brought to you in part by Sushi Market Sprouts on 7th in Santa Cruz and Kaito in the Capitol Mall Food Court. Treat yourself to the finest Japanese cuisine you'll find anywhere with fresh sushi to go and delicious ramen dinners. Sushi Market Sprouts and Kaito. Yum! It's time for another edition of China Watch Radio on AM 1080 KSCO. Today it's John T. McCollier and myself, and we want to thank all of you for joining us today. As always, we know you have a choice, and we're glad you chose KSCO. We have Michael Olson, who is out today doing other things, and Nan and Amy are both out of the picture today, out of our county, actually, both of them today. And so it's just John T. and I to recap some of the major stories in the news today regarding China, and we have a bunch of things. We have sort of a catch-all category today. It's called China is facing a worldwide changes of a scale unseen in a century. And boy, that is an understatement. There's a lot going on. Hello, John T. How you doing?
Hey, my friend. It's great to be here with you.
You know, I was looking at our show notes today, and I was, man, this is just amazing. First of all, the stories pop up in the news daily. As a matter of fact, in our last national newscast just a moment ago here on KSCO, there was another brand new China story that popped up that we haven't even had time to consider. So I imagine this will be something that we will be dealing with for quite some time.
Well, it is interesting, Billy, to see what does and doesn't pop up in the, let's call it legacy media. Because, if you keep your eye on websites like CNN or MSNBC or Fox News or something like that, you'll find that you don't really see the content that we go over in this show. Very little of it actually appears there. Occasionally, I mean, something really substantial has to happen in order for it to pop up. Fox did cover the story about the Chinese tennis star who's now disappeared. I understand you'll be discussing that in just a little bit here. But why don't we start out by being as rational and respectful as we possibly can. And that's my lead into the first story, which is Xi calls for rational U.S. policy, lays out red lines in 3.5-hour respectful summit with Biden. This is, of course, referencing the recent virtual meeting between the U.S. president and Xi Jinping. Let me just read this paragraph here. It'll get our feet wet. Lasting far past Biden's bedtime Monday evening. I had to chuckle at that. This is an article that was posted on Zero Hedge, and they're let's just say they're a little they're not very pro Joe Biden. As much
That's putting it mildly.
His much anticipated virtual summit with Chinese leader Xi Jinping lasted more than 3.5 hours and was widely described as mutually respectful, as both vowed to find the right way to get along, in quotes. Though both sides agreed they weren't looking for specific outcomes to the meeting, each subsequently appeared to be in agreement that the conversation was candid and effective in improving mutual understanding, as the Chinese side put it. Both agreed on the need for guardrails to avoid open conflicts, specifically described as common sense guardrails to ensure that competition does not veer into conflict and to keep lines of communication open, according to President Biden's remarks. Now, President Biden, of course, is very pro guardrails because he can't get up a flight of stairs without them.
Well, he's also pro guardrails because he knows that if he's going to get any positive press at all in dealing with China, he's going to have to play nice, just like they're going to have to play nice if they're going to get any positive press on their side.
Well, now there was one immediate actual to-do change that resulted from this meeting. For the most part, it was just to see if the two of them could have a conversation and be polite. But there was some little item having to do with fast-tracking American executives' access to China. I mean, It's not something to get very excited about. Honestly, I find that a little annoying that the one item that they seem to think they should act on now is getting our bigwigs into China to go make business deals. So there's that. They did achieve that. I want to just read a couple other things here from I wanted to say president from Chairman Xi Jinping. We are patient and we are willing to use our utmost sincerity and make the utmost effort to strive for the prospect of peaceful reunification. Of course, talking about Taiwan here. However, if Taiwan independent separatist forces provoke and coerce or even break through the red line, we will have to take drastic measures. So it sounds to me like Xi is taking a pretty hard line with Biden with regards to Taiwan.
That's exactly the word I was going to use, hard line. It's a hard line approach.
Right. And then I found some other terminology here interesting. We must insist on mutual benefit, do not play zero-sum games, and do not engage in you to lose and I win, or you lose and I win. I think it's just badly translated. This is really the critical dynamic between the U.S. and China in terms of our relationship is this concept of a zero-sum game and China's fear of the U.S. moving to a Cold War strategy with regards to our relations.
Jonty, in recapping this virtual meeting between the chairman and our president, it brings to mind something kind of ironic to me, because the president today has been doing exactly the same thing that he did with the chairman. He has had a meeting with both the president of Canada and the president of Mexico, our two closest neighbors. And he is it's striking how similar the rhetoric is, because there's been some tension from the last time an American president had dealings with Canada and Mexico. It was a different president, and there was quite a bit of tension involved. The NAFTA agreement did not go particularly well. The president of Canada and the president of Mexico both felt they got kind of a bum deal in that, and there was some tension involved. I think today the current American president meeting with those two leaders, there is much the same kind of rhetoric surrounding those closer meetings than they had with China. It's the same sort of background press coverage. Is I think the best way to put it. So I think our current American president, Mr. Biden, has got his hands full wherever he goes to meet with a foreign dignitary.
Well, that may be the case, although I think one of the main sort of geopolitical shifts that's happening is that the United States has exchanged our security guarantees in the past. The United States has been the vital element in guaranteeing free and open trade because of our military presence, essentially. And the U.S. was willing to take disadvantageous trade agreements and economic situations and just sort of deal with that because our economy is so big, it doesn't matter. We'll just absorb, some minor losses here and there in order to guarantee our military access and military alliances with various other countries. And we're at a point now where the U.S. is kind of fed up with doing that, and we don't really need to do it in the way that we used to. It's not necessary. We produce our own oil, for one thing. We could be, if we wanted to be, oil independent, energy independent.
Right.
So we don't need to guarantee the safety of shipments from Nigeria or the Middle East or Venezuela or something. And then the global trade situation is such that Mexico and Canada are by far our biggest trading partners, but our economy doesn't really need the rest of the world.
Well, let's talk about that for a minute, because my first article I've been following today involves what we're just talking about, how American leaders have failed to help workers survive the China shock. You know, the fact that China has taken a bunch of manufacturing jobs and some other things away from us. There is a bunch of reviewed papers from a China shock saga, which was published in 2013 by Otter, Dorn, and Hansen. The economists found that between 1990 and 2007, trade with China killed about 1.5 million American manufacturing jobs. That's about a quarter of all manufacturing jobs lost during that period. But what was even more startling about this is this. These losses were heavily concentrated in small and medium-sized communities dotting America's heartland. You know, there's that perception that, well, all the jobs in Detroit went away. But actually, the workers who lost most of the jobs were in smaller areas scattered around the country, around America's heartland. And workers who lost their jobs in those areas struggled to find other work. The China shock created what looked like a miniature Great Depression in many of those small communities. So, you know, this is a problem that we're going to have to deal with, and I think it's one of the things that that we've all come to grips with. And you know, with the, I don't know if you've noticed, Jonty, but a lot of jobs are going unfilled right now because folks feel like if they hold out, they might get better wages. They might raise the wages. There's a big strike at one of the big American companies, John Deere. They make all kinds of farm and heavy equipment. John Deere has offered what looked to me, when I looked at it last week, like a pretty good contract to its workers. They've given a lot of, they've given in to a lot of the workers' demands for the contract negotiations. But as it turns out, the workers are holding fast and said, no, this doesn't look good enough yet. Go back to the table and see what you can give us, what else you can give us.
Right. Well, I mean, I think were we to examine the reasons why there's so many unfilled jobs in the U.S., it would be a 2-hour program in and of itself. What's so extraordinary in this article is just the staggering amount of manufacturing jobs.
That's right.
1.5 million.
That's a lot of. That's a lot of work. That's a lot of work that went somewhere else.
I also found this little segment in there interesting as well. They say that between 1991 and 2013, China's manufacturing exports went from 2.3% of the world's total to 19% of the world's total manufacturing exports.
You might as well round that up to 20%. That's a lot. That's
Right.
1/5 of everything made in the world.
Right. But then again, it is 1/7-ish of the population of the world. And were we to go back to the 1500s, China constituted about, folks, I mean, what the heck is GDP in the year 1500? It's very different than it is now. People are trading textiles and there was and pottery.
It was barter. You know, I'll give you a pot if you give me an axe. You know,
a lot of the world would be on barter. How do you calculate purchasing power?
Exactly.
Parity or something like that, or the value of a currency when you don't even have international currency exchange. But still, there's economists who've studied this, and they say, I wish I'm quoting someone in particular here, but it was projected at something like 30+%. China's GDP was pegged at around 30+% of the world's total GDP.
Wow.
So there's some argument, and this argument I believe is made by the Chinese Communist Party, who borrow a lot, who think of themselves in a historical context, and they talk about this sort of correction. It's a correction back to where it should be, where China's economy is a very, very substantial portion of the global economy. We'll see about that, though, right?
Yeah. There's the next article on our list that talks about what you're talking about, the the adoption of a resolution on history that essentially justifies the third term for the chairman.
Well,
it's amazing.
Why don't I get onto that, and we'll see what we can do here. So the title is, and I should mention to our listening audience, please read along with us, join in, go to ChinaWatchRadio.com. You'll see a section there called Know Before the Show, and in it we post a series of articles before every show that are topical, interesting, contain the sort of unique perspectives that you won't find in the lamestream legacy media. So we invite you all to go there. Sign up for the newsletter as well if you want to keep up with us in your email inbox.
There's a lot of information in there that if you didn't read the articles, you would not know this, because as John T. mentioned at the top of the show, a lot of this information just isn't covered in the Western press. It's just not.
Right. There's a problem with reporting the news, because reporting the latest thing that just happened isn't necessarily giving people the breadth of context by which to understand the world.
Right.
So hopefully we're doing a little bit more than just reporting the news in that regard. Okay, so here we go. What Xi Jinping's elevated status signals for the Chinese foreign policy. For those of you who haven't been keeping up with this show or otherwise don't know, I should just read this. It'll cover it. This year's plenum, this is a annual meeting of NAN explained around 2,000 top Chinese party officials. This year's plenum adopted a resolution on history that essentially justifies a third term for Xi. The justification, according to a communique issued by the state-run Xinhua news agency, is that China is facing, in quotes, worldwide challenges of a scale unseen in a century, and thus needs a strong leader to see it through. The communique also says that Xi is now officially the founder of a third era of communist Chinese history. Now, the first era was Mao Zedong's era, though it sort of started in 1949 and ended with his death in 1976, around about the time I was born. The second was the reform era of Deng Xiaoping, wherein they had that whole strategy of biding their time and working towards a more modern economy, etc. And around about the time Xi came to power, that era began to come to an end. And I did notice here that it seems to be about every 40 years or so.
What's really interesting is they're making a big deal out of this being the third era of the communist Chinese history, right? From right. Roughly 1948 till now. When you consider the entire length of the history of this country, what is it, 6,000 years?
9. It really depends.
It depends how you calculate it, but it's thousands of years. And we're talking about the time. This is the third wave of communism from the year 1948.
Your perspective changes a lot when you go to a part of the world and there are actual old things.
Yes.
The United States, particularly on the West Coast, has little of anything that's older than 100 years.
Unless you're talking about maybe the Adobe Mission buildings, which still exist.
Right.
Everything else is, new.
That's right. On the East Coast, you can see some old buildings. There's a couple old brick buildings that might date back to the 1700s. But if you're in Beijing, you've got the Forbidden City, which I couldn't put a date on for you off the top of my head. Certainly, the Great Wall of China dates back over 1,000 years. And then another thing that I found very fascinating in that part of the world, particularly in northern China. Now, I understand the environment, meaning the natural environment, is much different in other parts of China. But in the regions of northern China that I traveled in 1998, I didn't see a tree that wasn't planted. Every tree I saw was in a row, and that gives you a real sense of the human presence that the every aspect of the landscape has been affected by human beings.
Yeah.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So at any rate, with regards to this new historical era, we're all trying to understand, what the strategic objectives are, what the economic objectives are, so that we can have some sort of a sense of what this new era is going to contain. What's China going to do, right?
Yeah.
So they're looking at a situation where, even though their economy has been growing incredibly well, they're actually lagging behind the United States in terms of wealth generation. There might be some funny financial finagling going on here. What does it mean that we've generated a bunch of wealth? Well, we've generated a bunch of wealth for our elites, so that might not be a good kind of wealth generation. But in terms of money, wealth, in terms of the monetary value of all of the assets and everything of value in the U.S. versus China, the U.S. is actually not just keeping up with China, but pulling a little bit ahead over the last decade or so. So that creates an interesting sort of dynamic. And also China's, I think we're going to discuss this later, but China's GDP is slowing down.
Yes,
the GDP growth is slowing down.
Yes, it is.
One of their goals here is that they want to try and more evenly distribute the wealth that they do have, and they're
after all, it's communism.
They're looking to try to bring up the per capita income to around $25,000 a year, which is actually an extraordinary number if you think about it, because as we've discussed in the past, there's 600 million people in China who are subsisting on $300 a month or something along those lines.
Right, exactly.
So what it means to have the per capita, how evenly distributed is that per capita income going to be? There's lots of different ways that math could work out, but it does seem that the goals here are to make a more independent economy and one that is generating wealth for the lower classes. Whether they're able to succeed at that is a vastly different subject, and I have very strong doubts as to whether or not that could be the case.
So let's look at China now and how they're affecting other countries. And this may sound familiar to you. It sure hit a nerve with me when I read this, maybe because I spent so much of my time in the Pacific Asian region when I was younger. Security cooperation between European and Asian allies of the United States has been expanding for the last several years. But here's something that's a little disconcerting for me. Germany is not among the usual players in this regard, as it is not actively engaged in the geopolitics of the Pacific region. But unlike the United Kingdom or France, there is some attention that needs to be paid to security arrangements being made between Japan and Germany. Does that sound familiar to you? Apparently, in the Indo-Pacific strategies, several reasons are being knocked out for this particular strategy of Japan and Germany trying to band together. One of them is they're trying to band together to save some of their interests from the Chinese. It's an interesting, well, in light of history, I mean, I don't want to bring up bad history, but World War II, if you'll remember, was a giant alliance between Japan and Germany, and several other countries, by the way. But Japan and Germany, we fought them. The United States and its allies fought these two countries for quite some time. It was years before we finally, got the war under control and ended.
Yeah, if you went back to 1939 and told somebody that Japan and Germany are joint patrolling the South China Sea and it's a good thing, they'd fall out of their chair. It's obviously a world away from where we were, but it's still very interesting to see the extent to which Europe and all our Asian allies as well are taking this whole Taiwan situation very seriously.
Yes, they are, and rightly so, because it could turn. Look, if anything's going to spark the world into a legitimate World War III, I got to believe China and Taiwan's problem is going to spread to the rest of the world, because for many countries, Taiwan is we think of Taiwan as a country. Many citizens around the world, view Taiwan as its own country, not part of China, mainland China. And so I think China is really bummed out about this, to use a term from the 70s. And as you mentioned earlier in this program, Chairman Xi is not down with letting Taiwan exist by itself.
Well, he's really painted himself into a corner, hasn't he? Because he said, we have this one red line, and the one red line is recognizing Taiwan as an independent nation and letting them join the international community and the WHO and the UN. And there's an awful lot of countries that actually would like to see that happen increasingly. And we'll get to more details on this later on in this episode. But what do you do when you've staked your reputation on this red line?
Absolutely.
And then people start crossing the red line?
Yeah, it's really quite scary. And look, we could continue on this, but I think we ought to just leave it here for right now and move on to the next topic, which is also somewhat disconcerting. If China was a teenager, it would be near the end of its teenage growth spurt.
That's actually a very fascinating way to think about it. And people do often criticize the United States, saying, you're just a very young country. You're only 200 years old. You don't know anything. Well, the Chinese Communist Party is 70 years old. So while we're a young adult, they are in fact a teenager, or sometimes perhaps even younger than that. So at any rate, the American Enterprise Institute published a rather lengthy analysis of the Chinese economy, looking at demographics and things like that. I'm not going to do this article justice at all. It's full of some really interesting charts. As we've discussed many times on this show, one of the important factors to keep an eye on with regards to China's relative prowess is military and economic, is that they are, I believe, the fastest aging population in the world. Their median age is going to be over 50 by 2030. So yes, they have a very large population, but if you consider that there's a rapidly growing segment of that population that's requiring the young to take care of them, we're looking at a huge drag in terms of what they can do economically and what they can do militarily.
And to not to point the finger too heavily, but it's their own fault. They had some unfortunate policies concerning family planning in the last 40 years that have sort of set themselves up for this hugely and rapidly aging population.
Well, there's that, but at the same time, had they pursued a very high growth population strategy, I'm not sure they would have necessarily found themselves in a much better place. If their population was 2 or 3 billion right now, they would be having extraordinary difficulties feeding themselves and having enough clean water and all sorts of things like that. So it's a difficult situation globally. Population is a challenge. I am all for having lots of babies. Personally, I think more people means more economic action. It means empowerment. It means a parental mindset. Parents think about the next generation and make decisions for the benefit of the next generation.
Oh, come on, Jonty. Tell the truth. You just want your kids to take care of you when you get really old.
So I can go party.
That's right.
Yeah. No. Joking aside, I should just mention, though, from this article here, let me read this excerpt here. China's once stunning wealth growth has eased. From 2000 to 2010, it soared nearly 600%. We're talking about wealth here. It's a little bit different than GDP. So this would be the value of all of the properties and all of the money that anyone has in any bank account and the value of their cars and whatever it is, however you want to, whatever the economic details are. From 2010 to 2020, it rose less than 200%. During that same time, from 2010 to 2020, I mentioned this earlier, the wealth advantage of the U.S. over the PRC climbed from 39 trillion to 51 trillion. So the U.S. is, $12 trillion more richer than China at the end of the last 10 years. So that's kind of an interesting perspective on the whole GDP thing. We're always lamenting our low GDP growth, but at the same time, the U.S. has got a wealth growth advantage, which I don't know. We could look at that.
You could break that down and either get good. There's statistics and then there's damn statistics. You could break it down and make it look any way you want with the numbers.
Yeah.
But for the most part, a lot of those numbers here in the United States are a small number of people with a whole lot of money.
Well, yes, there's that, and then here's the other trick, Billy. I believe you own a house. You told me a lamentable story about a fire in your garage not too long ago, I believe.
Yes, that's actually my dad's house, but yeah, it burned the barn down.
So that house's purchase price as a percentage of the income at that time, accounting for inflation and whatnot, although we're really talking about inflation. If you looked at the purchase price of that house and then looked at its value today, you could say, well, how much wealthier are we today?
Exactly.
But it's actually the same house.
It is exactly the same house, exactly the same property, and it's now 40 years older.
Yeah.
But if you're looking at San Francisco is a perfect example. I was reading an article today about a particular piece of property in the marina area that has increased in value in the last 20 years by something like 25 times.
Wow.
It's ridiculous. And who the hell's going to pay $8,000 a month rent in San Francisco? You know what I mean? I mean, who can afford that kind of? Nobody I know. Well, maybe one or two people, but not too many.
Apparently, people do. Well, I understand our housing market has suddenly hit a wall and is slowing down at the moment. But a friend of mine sent me a listing from the old neighborhood we grew up in Los Gatos of maybe three, 4-bedroom house, $3 million.
Yeah.
It's comical.
It is comical.
I jokingly said to him, I bet they're just going to tear it down and build a McMansion.
Well, there was that really famous story that made all of the Bay Area nightly newscasts, the big ones up in San Francisco, about this place in Palo Alto that had burned down. It was just barely still standing. It had burned out everything. It had a fire in the house. Property sold for $3 million, and it was a burned-up house.
Ha! Yeah, right. Well, so at any rate, we're boasting about our wealth growth. Maybe not boasting, but this article is pointing that out. So, I mean, we'll have a little bit of a skeptical eye on that. Regardless, that measure is very interesting when we look at how the Chinese population gains wealth. How do you build generational wealth when you aren't actually allowed to own a property? You're allowed to own it for a period of time, but then
what is it? In China, it's a 33-year lease, I think. So it's not a very long. I mean, it's one generation's lifetime, and then you start over.
Well, we should really drill down into exactly what that means. When you get to a year before the lease is up, do you then sell the property at a windfall? I'm not sure. I'd really be interested to know how those mechanisms work, and we got to involve, I think, Nan, Amy, and Olson in that. So hopefully that's something we'll cover in the not too distant future.
In order to stay very serious now, this next story on our list really frightens me for a number of reasons. As you know, I spent a great deal of time in the marine environment in the South Pacific, so this kind of stuff really bothers me. I don't know if you're familiar with, there's a country, Kiribati. Now, Kiribati, up until a little while ago, had one of the world's largest marine reserves for commercial fishing. They didn't allow it. We're sorry, this is a special place. You can't, bring your fishing trawlers in here. We won't allow it. And it was codified on the world stage and backed by the United States and several other governments. The Kiribati government has decided to open up one of the world's largest marine reserves to commercial fishing and to deregister that marine reserve as a World Heritage Site, which means countries that don't have any problem overfishing, like China, will come in there and fish this to oblivion. This is a really scary story.
Yeah. Well, now, Kiribati, for this audience who doesn't know, and frankly, I had to look this up, I believe it's about halfway between the Solomons and Hawaii. So it's way out in the middle of the Pacific.
Yeah, it's not heavily patrolled by anybody, but, there are things that the United States Coast Guard and the United States Navy do, and one of them is to cruise marine reserves. And
as we've covered in past episodes, there's been a whole lot of conflict around the Galapagos with a fleet of Chinese fishing vessels just surrounding it. Overfishing is something that is a real bear in my world. It just pangs my heart because I just have this love of the ocean and this haunting intuition that were we all to just ease up and treat the ocean with a little bit more respect, we would find an absolute abundance there. We find the ocean solving a lot of our problems for us. If we would just ease up on the gas pedal, let certain stocks replenish, and once they're replenished, we get to all have a whole bunch more sushi. And the biggest obstacle to that is this one particular country which has a unilateral approach to the ocean, which is to say they really don't give a hoot about everybody else's attempt to regulate the fishing industry.
Yeah, that's a good, concise way to put it. China just doesn't care. They honestly don't.
Yeah, I'm not going to call that win-win cooperation.
No.
But let's talk about China's where China is building alliances in the world. Now, it's an interesting
they're actually
topic.
looking for friends, believe it or not.
Well, they have been for some time, and every nation looks for friends. It's a very natural thing. I think that there's a little bit of a nuance to China's particular relationships. Now, I'll just read through this quick here. So we have an article, again, on ChinaWatchRadio.com that we invite you all to go and take a look at. This article is titled, China's Search for Allies. Is Beijing building a rival alliance system? I'm going to go ahead and just say no, but I'm going to read this anyways. And I'll explain myself momentarily. China has avoided building a traditional network of allies thus far for reasons ranging from long-standing ideological inclinations to hard-headed strategic calculations. Since the early days of the People's Republic, Beijing has sought to portray itself as a leader of the developing world and a proponent of non-aligned movement principles, of non-interference and anti-imperialism. In more recent years, Chinese leaders have begun to insist that they practice a quote-unquote, new type of international relations, eschewing traditional power politics in favor of win-win cooperation. Such language is meant to bolster the narrative that China's rise should not be feared, but be welcomed as a boon for global development and prosperity, and to distinguish Beijing from Washington, which Chinese leaders frequently criticize for maintaining an outdated Cold War mentality. Now, I actually think that criticism is often fair. As we've discussed in the past, I wish that the Western economies would have a more proactive stance towards the global South and all of the development opportunities that are there. Boy, could the United States be a more successful, wealthier place were we to have a more proactive economic relationship with particularly sub-Saharan Africa, in my mind, but also South America and Indonesia, etc. At any rate, China builds these. I see China building alliances in sort of two distinct ways. One is the sort of string of pearls, Belt and Road scenario, where they're pitching up in Pakistan and saying, "Well, boy, are we going to build you guys a fantastic port." And then Sri Lanka is a good example as well, where after Goldman Sachs comes in, by the way, and helps broker a bunch of loans. They then find these countries are then finding themselves in a situation where they can't possibly service the debt that they've gone into in order to construct these facilities, and likewise all of the contracts are going to Chinese companies.
Sure, they get taken over.
Yeah, so I mean, hey, Billy, I've got this great opportunity for you. You're going to give me a loan that I'm then going to use to hire myself to build myself a cottage on your property. Good deal, right? So there's that scenario, and then the other one is the more geostrategic one, wherein North Korea, Russia, I believe Cambodia, Venezuela are, and I think Myanmar is on the list as well, are related to such that it's things like we need oil from Iran. Okay, there's
yes,
that.
Yeah, there you go.
We really like Russian aviation defense technology, and Russia would be quite happy to sell it to us.
Sure, they will.
North Korea is a kind of foil that China can use to distract and annoy the United States whenever the U.S. doesn't have enough on its plate, right? So in Cambodia, Venezuela, for obvious, I mean, I don't know about obvious reasons.
You could keep going around the world. Look, it's the same scenario in most of these places you're talking about.
So these are really, they look like military alliances, but let me ask you this. China gets involved in a conflict with the West over Taiwan.
Are these little countries going to help?
I highly doubt it.
Me too. I highly doubt it.
They're all gone. And to compare that to the alliance system that the United States is building with AUKUS.
That we already have. We have NATO. We have all of these, all of these agreements with countries all over the place.
Right. So when you talk about an alliance system, so they've, I appreciate the concept of not wanting to be imperialistic. That appeals to the libertarian and or traditional Enlightenment liberal values, that I hold near and dear. But in terms of building a true alliance system, I don't believe that's what they've really succeeded in doing. They've more built a momentary mutual beneficence arrangement with these handful of somewhat authoritarian places.
I can see, looking at the clock, we're not going to get through all of these in the first hour, so we can start the discussion in the second hour. But I do want to revisit something we've talked about in past shows for just a moment, okay? Remember when we talked in our last program and the program before it about people who disappear? Well, guess what? That has not stopped. It has not slowed down. And now the Chinese government, I don't know I can't honestly say the Chinese government is behind this, but I can sort of wink and nod at it that it's probably behind it. A very prominent Chinese tennis star who accused an ex-vice premier of assault has disappeared. Nobody knows where the whereabouts is of Chinese doubles pro Peng Shuai. She accused a senior government figure of sexual assault. The story is in the news because nobody knows where she is now.
Can you imagine, Billy, if somebody comes out in the Me Too movement and they say, whoever it is, Harvey Weinstein, Bill Cosby did this or that, and then they vanish?
Look. Let's just use the American gymnastics team as an example, okay? several of the young women who were on the gymnastics team accused Dr. Nasser, the gymnast doctor, of inappropriate just about everything. And can you imagine those gymnasts disappearing?
Jeez. It's a starkly different situation. And where are the feminists on this?
The Chinese feminists. Are there any Chinese feminists at all?
Because yes. No, there's a burgeoning Chinese feminist movement.
Well, they're all afraid to say anything right now because they don't want to disappear along with the tennis star.
Well, they might be saying anything on their social media using various code words that get through the Great Firewall, for all we know. And it would be neat to know the details on exactly what's happening over there with regards to this and get some answers. But I really have to wonder, where's the global outrage? And I'm talking about where's the Democratic Party on this? Where are all of the feminists from around the world?
The feminists from around the world should be screaming about this.
Yeah. There you go.
I mean, look at what happened when the young woman disappeared. Her boyfriend apparently killed her and then killed himself in the Florida Everglades. But I mean, that story went worldwide. How come this really famous person from China, she was the Chinese doubles winner, she's gone?
Yeah.
I mean, it boggles your mind. Anyway, look, we're running out of time. Let's move on to the next one. Chinese democracy, is that a joke or not?
I thought this was really quite a fun little article to read. And it made some interesting points. It's clearly has an anti-China bias, but it really makes some great points, and I recommend reading it. Of course, we have an anti-China bias, so I don't know why I'm even mentioning that. At any rate, the article titled, "We Must Stand with Taiwan, Chinese Democracy is a Joke." I should say anti-CCP bias. I'm correcting myself here, Billy, because as we always double over backwards to point out, we are big fans of Chinese culture and the Chinese people. We have problems with the nature of their government, though we also do our best to be as objective as we can with regards to our own problems here in the West. He's saying Chinese democracy is a joke. The author describes this. I'll just read this here. Li Zhanshu, the chairman of the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress, enunciated in detail what she had outlined previously. Regarded as the number 3 official in the CCP, Li listed 5 ideas that are rejected by the CCP, namely so-called constitutionalism, multi-party elections, the division of powers, the bicameral system, and the independence of the judiciary.
All right, I'm going to have to stop you there because we're almost completely out of time. We got to get our commercial break in before we stop this hour, but we'll be back to continue this discussion.
Well, Billy, can we go over each of those when we get back?
Yes, we can, but not right now. Satisfy your hunger right now with the delicious ramen and sushi you'll find waiting for you at Kaito. Easy in and out location in the Capitola Mall food court. Special orders welcome. Fresh, delicious, and oh so good.
This is Koji. I'm looking forward to seeing you at my restaurant, Kaito.
Shop for a gift that's truly unique and exciting and have a lot of fun at clarksauctions.com. Hi, I'm Patty Clark. At Clark's, you can bid and win gifts of jewelry, art, furniture, collectibles, and more. And get it in time for the Christmas holiday. Bid now, be the winner at clarksauctions.com. That's Clark with an S, auction with an S.com. clarksauctions.com.
People do not like going to the dentist unless they're going to this dentist. Hello, folks. Michael Olson here with Dr. Guy Peabody. Well, doctor, you work with a lot of people who haven't been to the dentist for a long, long time. There's got to be a little fear there when they show up in your office.
Yeah, it's funny you ask that. People are worried when they first come to see us if they haven't been to the dentist in a long time because they're afraid they're going to get berated. And I chuckle at that because we're here to help people. We assure them that we have today and the future, and we're just going to take good care of them, and everything's going to be fine. fine. The most important thing we can do for them is listen to them. We want to find out what their concerns are. We want to find out who they are as people. We want to know if they're apprehensive about dental care or not. We want to know what their goals are. My job is to mainly find out how I can make them happy, and I can't do that unless I know what's going on inside.
Call Dr. Guy Peabody for a consultation today and wake up to a beautiful smile tomorrow. 831-457-0343 or visit drpeabody.com.
At Batteries Plus, we do more than fix phones and tablets. We help our neighbors power their lives. Visit Batteries Plus in-store, curbside, and online for fast and reliable phone and tablet repair. Learn more at batteriesplus.com.
If you've got dry skin, cracked heels, age spots, or vision problems, then you should try the Healthy Brain and Heart Pack. Not only does it have all 90 essential nutrients, but it also has an extra dose of essential fatty acids and selenium. Gray hair, wrinkles, hemorrhoids, and forgetfulness can all be addressed by the Healthy Brain and Heart Pack. This one-of-a-kind combination was designed by Dr. Joel Wallach after decades of research. Dr. Wallach has helped thousands of people to feel better when they and their doctors thought that nothing could be done. Log on to KSCOHealth.com to order the Healthy Brain and Heart Pack. That's KSCOHealth.com. Or call 831-218-KSCO to place an order and to speak with an authorized longevity distributor. That's 831-218-KSCO. Getting older is part of life, and that's okay, but you don't have to feel old. Order the Healthy Brain and Heart Pack today.
All right, we got about 2 minutes before the top of the hour. Jonty, do you want to start going over these before we hit the top here, or what? Or you want to just wait till the next half hour?
2 minutes, boy. I know. I mean, yeah.
You can't do it. That's the problem. We stacked so much information into our first hour here that we're going to have to slop over into the second hour.
I'm sometimes criticized, Billy, for having these long thoughts. And I find that in conversations, I'll begin a thought, and people will think that that's the complete thought. And then they'll comment back, and I'll hold on now. That's just the very beginning of my thought.
Yeah. Well, you're an unusual guy that way. You think a little more than the rest of us.
Well, Listen, you for tolerating me.
Oh, not at all. We're going to have another hour of this discussion. Mike has called in, so has Nordic Dave. We're going to ask them to hang on through the break or call back in 6 minutes, and we'll put you back on the phone board. We do have to end this first hour because we have this contractual agreement with the National News Company to bring us up to date and keep us informed, and so we want to do that. Susan Simon will, of course, have some weather and some traffic information following the national news update. And then we'll have hour number 2 of today's edition of China Watch Radio. Please go to our website, ChinaWatchRadio.com. Find out about what we're talking about. You can get the printed versions of all the stuff Jonty and I have been talking about in the first hour. This is AM 1080 KSCO, Santa Cruz, Salinas, Monterey. We urge you to stick around for our second hour. It's your discussions with us coming up.
Near the intersection of Mount Madonna and Hazel Dell, while the other is near the intersection of Mission Road and County Road 14. That's Lockwood-Halone Road in South Monterey County, for those of you who don't know County Road 14. Those controlled burns do have CAL FIRE on scene in both cases, or PILE fire and controlled burn. Weather forecast for today, as you might have noticed, mostly cloudy with highs in the low 60s, calm wind becoming west-southwest around 5 miles per hour. Tonight, there's a 30% chance of rain. That's later on tonight. And tomorrow, a 30% chance of rain still up until about 10 a.m. tomorrow morning with patchy fog before 9 a.m. Otherwise, mostly cloudy tomorrow with highs in the low 60s again. Boaters forecast for tonight calls for south winds around 5 knots, wind waves 1 foot, west swell around 2 feet at 11 seconds, and south around 2 feet at 16 seconds with a slight chance of rain. The time now, coming up on 7 minutes after 3 p.m., and that means it's time for the second hour of China Watch Radio, this time with Bill Graff, Jonty Collier, and Michael Olson.
China Watch Radio is brought to you in part by Sushi Market Sprouts on 7th in Santa Cruz and Kaito in the Capitol Mall Food Court. Treat yourself to the finest Japanese cuisine you'll find anywhere with fresh sushi to go and delicious ramen dinners. Sushi Market Sprouts and Kaito. Yum! Hour number 2 of China Watch Radio for this Thursday. I'm Bill Graff along with Jonty McCollier and now Michael Olson, who is back from his afternoon meeting. Hello, sir.
我为大后来的.
That's easy for you to say. I have no idea what you said.
I say, I'm back.
Oh, okay. So, Jonty, before we move on here, let me just give you a chance to finish up the 5 items that went along with the idea that democracy is, in fact, not a joke in China. It is, in fact, a joke in China.
Right. Well, these 5 ideas listed by the chairman of the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress were, I'll just recap here, constitutionalism, multi-party elections, the division of powers, the bicameral system, and the independence of the judiciary. Now, I hope we all remember our social studies class from, whatever it was, 5th or 6th grade here. But
a long time ago, yeah.
Just to take the first one, the idea of constitutionalism. Now, that concept in my mind means that there is a central document on which the government is based.
The piece of paper. I call it the piece of paper.
Anyone can refer to that document. It is a public document. It is something that we would amend by some kind of process, by some kind of governing process. The idea of rejecting that is kind of fascinating. But what do you have if you don't have a document that everyone can look at? What do you have if the actual rules are a secret and or change depending on the
whims of the king or the chairman?
It's a form of despotism, but it's more complex. Certainly, it's like a. I was lying awake in bed thinking about the life of Shaka Zulu, as I often do, last night, and I was thinking about how he, though he did this, he did this amazing task of unifying all of these different tribes into the Zulu nation. He still had the downfall of being essentially a despotic leader, and this led to his assassination. I think it was after the death of his mother. He went into this sort of crazed state of mourning and was abusing his subjects in all kinds of strange ways. And the mourning process wasn't ending. They sort of kept it going, and he was really kind of losing his mind. And then I think it was his brother came along and staged a coup and got rid of him. So one kind of wonders, if you don't have any kind of set, agreed upon document. Now I say
we have to follow written down rules in order for it to be an orderly society, and everybody has to know the rules.
I say this knowing full well that China does have an idea of a constitution. I actually own a copy. I bought the Chinese constitution when I was in China in 1998. The thing is that constitution could have changed quite a bit since then. And also that was a constitution wherein the ruling body grants rights to people, as opposed to our version of a constitution where no one is above the law, and we have to agree to change it together. Rights are granted by our divine nature and not by the ruling party at the time.
So in order to not go too far into the weeds here, because we have a couple of more topics you want to get to, let's recap of the other 3 items in this list of things that are important for a democracy to live. What do you think is the most important of the last couple?
Oh, boy, that's tough.
Yeah, see, that's the point. You really can't break it out, can you? You have to. What we have to do is consider each of these equally, because they're all important.
The division of powers, the bicameral system, and the independence of the judiciary are really kind of related.
Well, yeah, it's the form of government. It's the way it's designed.
if you have an independent judiciary, you probably have both of those others. That is to say, and then the concept of multi-party elections is a little bit different. That's a bit iffy. Imagine there was only. I mean, a lot of people in the United States will look at the Republicans and the Democrats, and even though they disagree in the most dramatic ways over a bunch of, what we all are led to believe are extremely important ideas, they still are very much in favor of
the system.
That benefit Wall Street. They still raise defense spending by 5 or 10% every year.
And they don't dispute the basic layout of how the government works either.
That's right. So there's an argument that could be made that would say that we actually don't really have two parties or more than one party. But I think the idea here is that you are not really allowed to have free and open discourse about various topics in order to fit into the authoritarian hierarchy.
Right. Do you want to finish out the list of our articles? Because I think I hate coal. I don't think coal's a good idea. Particularly the way China uses coal. They don't scrub it before they burn it. They just and it's a very pollution intensive industry. But China has urged developed countries to take the lead in cutting out coal. I find that amazing.
This is but Billy, there's something that's making me very nervous. Michael Olson's there and he hasn't said anything.
Well, hang on a minute. Say something.
Something.
He's very nervous that you haven't said anything.
Yes. Well, I wanted to drop by and give you sales figures for Singles Day.
Singles Day?
Yes, Singles Day.
I don't even know what you're talking about.
Well, John T., do you know what Singles Day is?
Singles Day is it's kind of like a Chinese Valentine's Day.
Well, kind of, but not really.
No, I understand what Singles Day is, but what I don't understand is what you're talking about sales figures.
Well,
how does that equate?
Because it's a very, very big deal. Now, Singles Day, for those who do not know, was a day invented by Jack Ma of Alibaba. Now, Jack Ma got to looking at the demographic of Chinese young people and discovered that, my goodness, there's a lot of young people who are not married.
I didn't know Jack Ma came up with this.
Singles.
I thought it was the Chinese government who came up with this.
No,
it's Jack Ma.
Jack Ma of Alibaba.
Okay, it's his fault.
So what Jack Ma did is they come up with a concept of we'll have a National Singles Day in which we have all of the singles of the country treat themselves to something nice, as if they were getting a Valentine from themselves. Okay? And so he made a big deal out of it. And guess what the day is for singles? 1111. November 11th is Singles Day. So all of those singles, 1111. Now, if you look at the population of China, you see there's a lot of unmarried young people buying things for themselves on Singles Day. They really got behind it. And this year's Singles Day sales figures for Alibaba, $84.5 billion.
Now, how does that work with a guy that's been almost disappeared?
Well, that's where things really get interesting, don't you know?
He's still there, but just barely.
He is still there, but just barely. And he's being really cool. So typically, the Singles Day merchandising is all about luxury and sexiness. And, if you're going to treat yourself to something nice, you really want it to be something nice. But as we all know, the Xi Jinping and the CCP folks have been coming down on all kinds of industry, and especially Jack Ma of Alibaba. And so this year, Jack Ma and Alibaba And all the other internet folks decided to feature social justice stuff for their pitch. This is what you bought.
Okay, give me an example of what Chinese people call
the same green stuff we do. Like soap made of
henna and
whatever.
Okay,
stuff like that. Green stuff.
Save the whales, but
save the whales stuff.
I got it.
That kind of stuff. So those sales were $84.5 billion. It was the slowest rate of growth ever for Alibaba's Singles Day. And that indicates there's a lot of interesting things going on in the younger demographics of China. One of which is that the rate of marriage is slowing dramatically.
Well, it wasn't all that great to begin with.
Yeah, but it's really slowing down now, as is the rate of divorce increasing. So it's a very interesting look. When you really want to look at how things are going, watch pop culture.
Wow.
And Singles Day, think of the invention. Here's a day when you buy something for yourself because you love you.
Oh, wow. Listen,
that was my thought.
Well, that's a good thought, Jonty. I'm gonna ask you if we can take a phone call because we have a caller, Mike, in Santa Cruz, who's been on for
He's been waiting. I'm sorry, Mike. Absolutely.
Yeah, let's talk to Mike. Ben's been waiting for an hour. You are a very special person, Mike. Thanks for waiting.
Well, God bless you, Billy. I've been hanging in there, right? I'm a tough guy.
What's on your mind today, sir?
Well, I was listening to the Jim Chu show earlier, and somebody came up with a suggestion that, and I talked to about the listeners being able to get together and give out phone numbers so they can contact each other anytime they want and just talk about various things. And I thought that was a really good idea. And I thought you guys would be the guys to talk to about that, because maybe Michael Olson,
sure,
and Billy, you guys have been around the block, and you could maybe arrange that. Like, I would like to get on the phone with Don and Salinas someday and just talk about where he's coming from and where I'm coming from.
That's really a great idea. The reason why talk radio works so good, though, Mike, is this: you kind of get into trouble when you're giving out personal phone numbers to other people unless they sign a waiver or something. Talk radio, you can call the station and it's sort of the online, on-air meeting place for everybody. You call our number and then we
only if you agree to it. This is what Susan Simon suggested. This, that you guys be the guys to talk to arrange this, so that only people who agree.
That makes sense. But until we have that, Mike, until we have that system into place, I think it'd probably be better to use the system we have, which is you call the KSCO number and then we try to put people together.
Okay, well,
that would be the starting way to do it. Right now the format of talk radio is you take one phone call at a time. There are some talk show hosts who prefer to have more or less a round table, and they'll put more than one caller on at the same time, and then everybody can talk to each other. Maybe we could explore that some more. That's a good idea too.
Okay. So what should I do to start?
Well, you've done it. You've put the idea out there already. So we'll see if it flies with other listeners.
All right.
Sounds good. Okay, and thanks for waiting.
Okay, Billy. It was an hour and 2 minutes.
Yeah, thanks, man. We appreciate the call. Let's move on to Nordic Dave, who hasn't waited that long. He's only been on for 40 minutes. Dave, thanks for waiting through our analysis of some of the day's news regarding China. We appreciate it.
No, I love it, actually. Thursday is my favorite KSCO day. I like Jim, too, rolling into the China Watch program and into Dave Michael. So it makes my afternoons good while I'm working.
Terrific. What's on your mind today?
Yeah, just real quick, you mentioned Zulu earlier. Actually, it's a really good film, 1964 film called Zulu, about the big British battle in 1879 with Stanley Baker and Michael Caine and Jack Hawkins and Richard Burton. It's a really good watch if somebody wants to get an insight into how the tribe actually tried to beat back the British Empire. But
it's a fascinating chapter of history, and I believe I actually had an ancestor at the Battle of Luanda, which I have the most difficult time saying.
You said it better than I can.
The question, the China topic I wanted to bring up real quick if I could, and I just appreciate the panel's perspective because I was a little confused myself. We had this thing all week about Biden saying, she's not my best, not my friend. And then when she opens a phone call, he says, "Oh, my friend Joe." And Biden sits there, his countenance improved. Like he stood up and he had this big beam, his eyes got bright. And what I couldn't tell is, was Biden basking in the glow of, this recognition from this global leader, or was he kind of understanding that he's being trolled by Xi? I'm just curious what you guys thought of that. I thought it was odd.
I think the second is the case. I think he realized he was being played somewhat, or was it the attempt was being made to play him in public? That's my thought.
Yeah, I was surprised that they weren't better set up for that, right? That, they had this whole confrontation about the level of friendship and relationship. I'm just surprised he didn't was ready with a reply or retort for that in the conversation, especially since that was the public part of the meeting.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure she sees an elderly president with plummeting approval ratings. And I highly doubt he's anticipating an 8-year presidency. So I don't know that she would have a lot of impetus to try and damage Biden politically.
Right.
I think that may have, just my wild guess here, may have just been sort of coincidental or lost in translation or something like that.
Well, like I said at the beginning of the last hour when we talked about this initially, Biden's had a lot of international meetings with, first he starts with China and then he has meetings with arguably his two most important allies, our direct neighbors today. He's had that meeting with both the president of Mexico and the president of Canada, the prime minister of Canada. And so, he's had a lot of direct interaction with foreign leaders all in a couple of days.
Well, in Mexico, too, and that looked like that took some steps backwards in terms of Mexico's demands on the U.S. as well.
Yeah, it's, what we have is we have a continent of protection. We're very fortunate. The United States is extremely fortunate in the fact that we don't really have to protect anything but the north of us and the south of us, and the north of us is our own territory. In other words, we have Alaska on top of Canada, then we have Canada, then we have us, then we have Mexico, and the only two neighbors we really have to worry about are Canada and Mexico directly. We can't really be invaded any other way.
Cuba isn't much of a threat anymore.
No.
I had back when I was in school, a buddy of mine cleaved off and went into the military, went to the Navy, and he was interesting. He was telling me that we think from a military standpoint, the United States is an island nation, just from the points that you had just mentioned, that our basically our threats are from over large bodies of water, not on our borders so much. Right. And I think some of that maybe factors into our misunderstanding of China as well. I'm wondering. I'm just curious what you guys think of that as well. We have this really close commercial relationship with Taiwan, and we have this kind of consumer goods relationship with China. But we seem confused over somehow now as a country of where do we kind of draw the line in terms of where our interests lie.
my thought on that is this. Look at what's happening off the coast of Southern California right now, where we have, I believe the current figure is 63 ships. It's down from 80-something ships last month. They're slowly getting through them. We import all kinds of stuff from around the world, but if you look at the manifests of all those ships parked out off our coast, a large number of those ships have part of their manifest as China. So, I think that sort of indicates where we are in our relationship with China. We Americans talk with our, we vote with our pocketbooks. And we've voted a lot for Chinese goods lately. At least it's evidenced by all the ships off our coast.
Right. But wouldn't you say that our relationship with Taiwan is more of a value-added relationship? I mean, we're getting, the leading-edge semiconductors and, software and other, fairly significant products that are fundamental to our economy. And China just seems to be largely, consumer goods, toasters and, air fryers and, shovels and sinks and things like that.
I up until, what was it, Jonty, just a couple of years ago, most every iPhone ever made was made in one factory.
You're talking about Foxconn?
Yeah. And so, if you think about how heavily invested the United States public is in products from China, I don't know that we can write them off as just a place where we buy stuff. I mean, every iPhone, you know how many iPhones are floating around in the United States and Europe now? Millions.
Yeah, but a lot of the chips and the software, I think, doesn't come from China necessarily. It's manufactured and assembled there. And that's easy to redirect, is which Apple had did, right? They moved. They were teasing about Kenosha, Wisconsin, I think, being a site, but I think they actually moved to India to manufacture the phones. But it's mostly the assembly process, not really the
that's right. Well, the whole idea of a supply chain is that there's a variety of different parts that are all being assembled at various different places. And China has had an advantage for the last decade and a half because everybody that's doing X type of thing is already there in the Shanghai region or wherever it happens to be. So they've got the engineers that know how to retool the assembly lines. They've got the assembly lines. They've got all of the folks in acquisitions who know the difference between, this type of resistor and that type of resistor or whatever the case may be. And that's been very advantageous for them. But I see that winding down in a huge big hurry here. The U.S., last week we were reporting on England investing heavily in rare earth mineral mining. The U.S. is shoveling billions into semiconductor production right now. I think that was part of the Defense Reauthorization Act, actually. But the thing is, semiconductors, to spin up a new semiconductor facility is a couple $2 billion in about 2 years.
That's right.
We're sort of beginning that process now in earnest, I would say. But we're not going to see the fruits of those efforts until 2000.
Yeah, the supply chain problem will continue for a while because we just haven't spun up the replacements.
And Jonty brought up a really good point, which was, I think it's overlooked a lot, which is, there's a center or focus of knowledge on how to acquire things, how to put them together, and that's actually it's much more complicated than it sounds like. There's a location. China as a center has all of the available materials. Either they're imported or they're built there. So there's the ability to facilitate, the manufacture of a component or a product that we've kind of lost a lot in the U.S. I mean, it's difficult to make things here because we have to import so much, right? We used to, make a lot of the components here. We don't.
Well, part of that, Dave, part of that is by law now. The fact that we had so many trade agreements with so many different countries, used to be back when Mr. Ford started the first assembly line for automobiles. Most of the stuff was made right here in the United States, but they had all these agreements where percentage of the parts had to come from Canada and a percentage of the parts had to come from Mexico and the percentage that And they were bragging for years about the fact that many cars that were made in the United States, in order for them to have the label "Made in America," they had to have so much percentage of the parts made actually here.
Right.
But that the global supply chain has gotten to the point now where you can build an entire Ford Explorer, except you got to wait for the computer chip that runs the main computer that powers the engine. You got to wait for that chip to come from whatever, and that's what the problem was. There's a bunch of cars that couldn't be made because they didn't have the final chip assemblies to put in to kick them out of the assembly line.
That's right. I understand there's thousands of cars right now sitting in lots in Mexico that are just missing
one part.
Key chips.
Yeah, one computer chip to make the whole thing run.
But doesn't that put Taiwan in a really special position? They've got every nation in the world is right now very sweet with Taiwan. The European Union is making all kinds of public declarations. Germany is sending a frigate to transit the Taiwan Strait. Do you think it's a coincidence that all these countries are at the same time desperately in need of semiconductors?
Do you remember years ago, I bought a computer and I was so happy with it. I bought an HP hot rod computer at the time. It was, I needed it for work, so I could access our automation system here at the station from home. I needed a computer that was fast enough, and I paid the extra money, and I got a computer with the hot rod at the time Intel processor. Whatever happened to Intel, man? Intel used to be the gold standard for speed and accuracy and clock speed and all that stuff, that you looked for in the main chip in a computer board. And you don't hear about Intel hardly at all anymore. Now you're waiting for the hot rod chip from Taiwan.
I've done a lot of business with Intel. I mean, they've lost really their internal drive. I mean, they got kind of fat and happy, and they couldn't compete with Taiwan. And even some of the domestic companies, NVIDIA and AMD, in terms of getting to the next, density of wafer, right? And they're just having a really hard time breaking that. In fact, Pat Gelsinger, who I used to work for, they're kind of a fully woke CEO, but he was on 60 Minutes, and he got raked on the coals a little bit by Leslie Stahl, which I thought was really good. He was advocating for government investment to help grow the chip industry in the U.S., and Stahl came back and said, well, you've got like $35 billion in the bank. What do you need taxpayer money for? And then Gelsinger was going,
Well, I just brought up an article here with the title, Intel is spending $20 billion to build 2 new chip plants in Arizona, and this dates from March. So
it'll be 2 years before they get them done.
That's right, but perhaps they're making some moves in that direction. It's partly given the current environment.
Wow, Dave, some great input into the show today. We appreciate it.
I love you guys. Take care.
Take care. Thank you for calling.
Yeah. Thanks, Dave.
All right, we've got another call from Nick in Royal Oaks. Nick, you're on China Watch Radio.
Hi. Fishing out to sea, I guess that's just the better edge of mutual destruction for them.
That's a very interesting point. Nick, the fact that they might fish themselves out of... I mean, the whole point of fishing the way China does is to feed all those people. But if they overfish it to the point where they can't feed anybody anymore, it's sort of counterproductive.
Yeah, and also the weapons we hold, they just get more... they're selling a fighter jet that surpasses our F-30 now.
Well, that's what they say. I don't necessarily believe that.
The Pentagon's going to be the first one to get one, whether it's ordered through somebody else, but they have to check it out.
Well, first of all, I don't believe it's faster than ours. I think we've kept the speed of ours as a big-ass secret.
Faster, I mean everything about it is supposed to...
Well, like I said, I don't believe that.
Well, should that be...
I believe you're referring to the J-16, which is China's version of a stealth fighter. And there is debate as to whether it should be considered fifth generation or 4.5.
They're finally giving back from stealing our secret. And then blacks, and the Chinese in California were the blacks of the South. They were treated wrongly, and I think that's the soft side of China getting into Africa. Oh, this slave master Western people, I mean, they don't think about Uyghurs. They never heard of Uyghurs. It's like Isigis. I bet you they're all just the kindest people there and moderate where we should be getting to them. They're being messed up. That's the distraction.
Well, you might be right, Nick. We appreciate the call and the idea. There you go. Nick, Nick's talking about the fact that China's going to various countries and maybe doing sort of the same thing that the British did when they went to some countries, and the United States was accused of doing in the South here in the United States.
Well, I think he was doing the opposite. He was suggesting that the history of colonialism is a geopolitical wedge that China uses to make inroads in various places. I wasn't exactly clear on what he meant with regards to the Uyghurs, but I think it's somewhat evident that the Han Chinese have a bit of a tradition of exclusion of various other groups, although China's history is very long. My kids actually were reading a fantastic story about about these two different groups, about the princess that belonged to this northern tribe that somehow allied with another tribe. And I think that was actually supposed to be part of the origin story of the Han Chinese, is that it was these two different tribes coming together at that very distant in the past time.
Hey, before we move too far out from what we were talking about to begin with, there's one more story in our stack of information that you've put on our website that I really don't want to bypass here.
Billy, I think we should get our act together and actually bang out the last three stories.
Yeah.
The one that I think you're about to start on right now is a whopper.
It really is, and I don't understand this. I'm going to need your help to understand this because I've been following this, but I don't quite understand how you can have your cake and eat it too here. Let me just say this. The Beijing Winter Olympics are months away, not very long away at all, less than 3 months. The Biden administration will soon have to make clear whether it plans to send an official delegation to China or not. In other words, the Biden administration will soon have to announce either a diplomatic boycott of the Beijing Olympics or not. Now let me ask the question I don't understand about. If you have a diplomatic boycott of the Olympic Games, does that mean we don't go? Does that mean our government says China bad, but we're sending our team anyway?
Right.
I mean, how does that work?
Right. So, it was interesting to sort of follow the development of this. The spokesperson for the Olympic Committee at some point in time said something with regards to the expediency of having China host the Winter Olympics, given the recent clamp down in Hong Kong and the revelations about what's been going on with the Uyghurs for decades, but all of a sudden everyone recognizes it for.
Well, not only the Uyghurs, I think folks are unhappy with what was happened in Tibet and a bunch of other satellite areas of China that.
Absolutely. So the spokesperson for the Olympic Committee comes out and says, look, this is the Olympics, guys. The whole idea of the Olympics is to put down the politics and get together and do some sport. And it's supposed to be something that encourages peace. It comes from this many hundred-year-old tradition in ancient Greece where they would actually say time out on their conflicts and go have the Olympics.
Go beat up on each other on the playing field.
And honestly, I get that, and I support that sort of perspective. Let's keep that sacred aspect of the Olympics. I still kind of question why it seems like China hosts the Olympics every second Olympics. But that said, there's lots of countries that can host the Olympics. When's the last time? I don't know. When's the last time? Name a country. Any country.
Well, Brazil.
When's the last time they had it in Uganda?
Well, Brazil had an Olympics a while back, and if you remember, part of the problem with having the Olympics in Brazil was they weren't really financially equipped to pull it off in a.
I totally understand. Yes,
and China apparently doesn't care about how much money they spend on stuff like that because they're they don't worry about that. That's not their that's not their focus. So So that's why China does so well in acquiring, an Olympics in the future because they
well, yeah, but as we've looked at in the past, they have a variety of influence campaigns going on.
Absolutely.
And methods by which they.
I wasn't going to say that bribery plays a part in the. I wasn't going to say that.
So I think the path, were Biden to take it, wherein the U.S. government doesn't send an official delegation, but we still send our athletes, is actually pretty smart. In the situation where he decides that all of these aspiring athletes don't get to go to the Olympics is kind of messed up. I mean, that really is taking politics to the next level and doing something somewhat authoritarian.
Well, think about
shied away from that.
Think about the political aspect of what you just mentioned, right?
Mm.
Here's a president whose approval rating right now ain't that great, right?
Mm.
Now, if he comes out with a statement that the United States government, is going to ban our athletes or prevent our athletes from going to China, his approval rating's going to dive even farther because everyone.
At the same time, if he doesn't make some sort of a statement with regards to the Olympic Games, then that's going to hurt him as well because he's trying to be tough on China. That's what the American populace wants at this juncture.
So what you have is the political not political. That's not the right word. Public relations nightmare of telling Sean and all the other famous athletes in the Winter Olympics they can't go speed skate and they can't go snowboard and they can't go down the giant slalom and they can't do all the stuff they're really good at and have been practicing for years and years and years now.
Right.
You can't go. No, we're banning. We're boycotting the Olympics as a country. You can't go.
We still have to look at the effect of the diplomatic boycott with regards to that first article we discussed at the beginning of the hour, where we were discussing the recent virtual meeting between Xi and Biden.
That's right.
Would it be considered rational and respectful by the Chinese, or would it cross a red line? And I would say it would be a brutal slap to the face that would be the seminal moment that permanently set China and the United States in a specific geostrategic course.
Yes. All right. So Dan has called from Salinas. Let's take his call before we wrap up the last two topics on our list today. Dan, you're on China Watch Radio.
Hey, guys. Very interesting topics. And now that you guys are talking about the sports Olympic, and let's get back to that tennis star that disappeared. Now, of course, you already went over that she posted something about an affair with a high-ranking party official.
That's right.
But in the past couple of days, something else happened. The World Tennis Association, WTA, came out and said, we need to help this gal. She's one of our athletes, and we want to get to the bottom of her disappearance. And then yesterday, Ms. Pang, on her Weibo, which is like our Facebook account, published that I'm fine. I'm just at home resting. I appreciate the WTA for worrying about me, but I'm fine. And if I do ever need anything, I will let the WTA know. Isn't that... somebody wrote that, I think.
Doesn't sound like her. Doesn't sound like
no.
So are we? Is the Chinese government now playing? I don't know what they're playing. It's not politics. It's something even more sinister than that.
Well, they're making an example because all these guys in Beijing, I'm sure most of them have mistresses and had different types of affairs, and so they want to make an example of this young lady and make sure the rest of the boys are protected.
Right. Yeah, Dan, I would agree. I think that with regards to the domestic PR is probably the best word for it. I believe the CCP wants to make overtures towards feminism and the Me Too movement and things of that nature. At the same time, they're an old boys club, and they're sure as hell going to circle the wagons and protect each other from that sort of whatever it is. Scrutiny. There we go.
Well, you know, I said this in our last program. There is no better country in the world at propaganda than China. They've got propaganda down to a fine science.
Well, let me tell you, this tennis star is not as interesting as the big actress that disappeared. I believe her name is Xiao Wei.
Xiao Wei, yeah, that's correct.
She's one of the richest entertainers in China. Her and her husband is said to be worth about $3 billion.
Well, look at Jack Ma, who founded Alibaba. He didn't completely disappear because he's so visible, but he came as close as you come to disappearing completely and not disappearing completely. I mean, this guy's worth billions of dollars. And
but you're talking about a movie star working in China, worth a couple of billion. That's it's not easy to make a couple of $1 billion.
That is correct.
A TV star.
Yeah.
Now here's the backstory on this. Her husband was the chauffeur of the mayor of Xinjiang.
Really?
Yes. And the mayor was charged and convicted and executed for embezzling $3 billion. So after the mayor was gone, the chauffeur supposedly went to Singapore, supposedly was very successful in business and made $3 billion.
Fascinating. And of course, we understand that some of these anti-corruption actions are part of Xi's cadra's method for gaining and retaining power and influence.
Well,
that's fascinating.
And could it be that Xiao Wei's disappearance has something to do with wanting to get those $3 billion back?
Okay. There's probably a lot to talk about here. Dan, Billy and I have to get to these next two articles because I will be personally depressed for the rest of the week if we don't. These last two are, I think, I don't know why we end up sometimes saving the juicy stuff right for the end. I really do appreciate your call, Dan. I hope you call back sometime because
I'll keep listening.
Thank you.
You've got a very interesting perspective.
Yeah,
so
absolutely. Thanks for the call and thanks for waiting.
All right.
All right.
Billy, is this one on me, I think, the one about the coal?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, this comes from The Guardian, who I'm beginning to see as a rather biased publication. But anyways.
Just now, really?
No, yeah. I mean, we all know that they hang left, but I don't know. There was something I was seeing the other day. It's Bill Gates' money being doned to a variety of different publications, and The Guardian was somewhere near the top of the list. At any rate, I get very easily distracted, so let me just whip through this here. China urges developed countries to take the lead in cutting out coal. Oh, thank you, China. On Monday, Beijing kicked the ball to developed nations. This is with regards to the COP26 meetings. Zhao Lijian, a spokesperson at China's foreign ministry, said that before asking all countries to stop using coal, developed countries should remember how far many developing countries need to travel in order to find sustainable ways to provide electricity for their citizens. We encourage developed countries to take the lead in stopping using coal while providing ample funding, technological and capacity building support for developing countries' energy transition. We need concrete actions more than slogans. Okay, so the United States is dramatically reducing our usage of coal. Europe, Germany, dramatic reduction in use of coal already over the past 10 years.
John T., let me point something out. Let me remind our listeners of a couple of brutal facts.
Okay, good. Please do.
You often cannot see across the street in Shanghai because of the pollution caused by coal-fired power plants in China. China currently is rotating its electrical grid service in order to keep most of the country in electricity because they can't get it done.
I think that's improved. That was
that has
weeks ago.
improved, but
they're
they're still having coal acquisition issues. And out of all the countries that China in this article you just cited talks about, I would venture to say, I'm not positive about this. I'd have to look up the exact number of figures, but I'm pretty close to positive that I can say this. China consumes and uses more coal for power plants than any other nation on the planet Earth.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
so I'm pretty safe in that statement based on the articles I've read for the last couple of years doing this program. So for China to come out here and it's like the pot calling the kettle black.
Well, they're saying you guys have to pay us money. They're saying if you want us to switch from coal, you have to give us money. Now, look, it's a valid argument on their part to look at the developing world because we don't want an industrialization of the global south wherein they build cheap coal-fired plants. That's
right. We don't want that to happen around the world. We'd rather fund other stuff.
India's in the hot seat as well because they're increasing their use of coal dramatically. But honestly, I see the whole thing as being rather insincere unless we tackle in a meaningful way the problem of. So China's saying we're going to start reducing in 2030.
Listen, we got this one out, and I want a lot. We're running out of time.
Super quick thing. The hashtag COP26 was viewed 120 million times in China, Weibo, I think, and COP26 ongoing was viewed 110 times. Just want to point out that there's a lot of people interested in this in mainland China.
Absolutely. Okay, now we got to get to this final one because, like you said, I don't know why we put some of the best ones on the last page. We better not do this again. The Bush family sponsored an event with blacklisted Chinese companies. Neil Bush,
Neil Bush,
Neil Bush, the son of President George H.W. Bush, is the co-sponsor of an international symposium on the peaceful use of space technology that begins on the 18th of November in Beijing. 3 co-chairmen of the forum are executives with the China Aerospace Science and Technology Corporation, a state-controlled contractor that builds China's military and space equipment. How is this not a conflict of interest on a giant scale?
Right. Well, the Bush family it wouldn't be the first time that they have a conflict of interest. If any of our listeners remember the Carlyle Institute, the Bush family has had investments that let's just say they've made some money off of wars.
Okay. American officials called the nuclear-capable missile the Chinese recently developed, the hypersonic missile, a national security crisis because of its ability to evade detection. A subsidiary of the KSCO reportedly developed that hypersonic missile at the Chinese military tested in August. Now, here's the interesting thing about this. The 3 co-chairmen of the forum are executives of the China Aerospace Science and Technology Corporation, the KSC. Now, like I said, these Americans are talking directly with the developers of technology we're trying to
I'm just excited, Billy, because this means that the journalists for MSNBC who are right now covering the Kyle Rittenhouse case, they're going to just drop that and they're going to go ask Neil Bush what he's doing, aren't they?
Yeah.
Of course, I'm being facetious.
Yes, just a little bit. Hey, listen, we're just about out of time. I'm going to go to my last commercial break, and we'll come back and wrap this up, okay?
Fantastic.
Satisfy your hunger with a fresh, prepared, twice-daily grab-and-go sushi you'll find waiting for you at Sushi Market Sprouts, 2 blocks from the beach at 300 7th Avenue in Santa Cruz. Fresh, delicious, and oh so good.
Hello, I'm Junko, and I look forward to serving you at the Sushi Market Sprouts.
The wait is finally over. Shen Yun returns to the stage with an all-new production filled with beauty, majesty, and a powerful message of hope.
The performance was enchanting, completely captivating on so many different levels.
I feel better about the world. I feel uplifted.
You are not just watching a performance. You are witnessing a culture reborn.
It touches you. It really does. Every American needs to see it.
Thank you very much to the director and whoever created it.
Now, you'll see what the modern world has never seen. China, before communism.
We didn't want to miss this. Have to come. Life-changing.
Come see it.
Make sure you see it. Make sure you see it.
Come see the performance that has touched the hearts of millions. Shen Yun. Coming to San Francisco, San Jose, Berkeley, December 22nd. Tickets at shenyun.com/CA, 888-633-6999.
This is Larry from Bullseye Archery, here to tell you what we have in our store. Longbows, recurves, all different types of compound bows. Our arrow selection is wonderful. We also have a small range. We have a tuning shop. I think kids need to get away from the TV sets and come and do something physical. And archery is something they'll really love. We're open 12 o'clock to 6 o'clock, Wednesday through Sunday.
Bullseye Archery, 5299 Scotts Valley Drive in Scotts Valley.
You have a quote you want to get in before we end the show today, Jonty?
Yes, a quote from Sun Tzu's The Art of War. Sun Tzu, by the way, is Korean. Just want to remind everybody of that, but is pretty well read. This had to do with the last article about Neil Bush's warm relations with Chinese defense industry. Entice the enemy's best and wisest men, so that he may be left without counselors. Introduce traitors into his country, that government policy may be rendered futile. Foment intrigue and deceit, and thus sow dissension between the ruler and his ministers.
Wow. Wow. Oh, that's a great way to end our program today. Jonty, thank you for your vast contributions to our program today. I want to thank Michael Olson for joining us and for you for calling in. We appreciate all of our callers and listeners today. We know you have a choice, and we're glad you chose us. Stick around. Flight 1080's on the way. This is KSCO, Santa Cruz, Salinas, Monterey. Have a great afternoon, everybody.